I need you to hear this from me as a clinician who has walked families through nights they never forgot. If you woke with a headache that does not behave like your usual ache, or if your words slipped in a simple sentence at breakfast and you shrugged it off as a long week, your brain may already be asking for help. I will not leave you with fear. Tonight, you can start a small safety practice that costs nothing and can tilt the odds in your favor. Write down any unfamiliar headache, any brief slur in your speech, any unsteady step that has no clear cause, and if those moments return, you reach out for care rather than waiting for a perfect time. I speak in the first person because I have seen both paths. People who dismiss the whispers often meet the storm. People who answer early often keep their strength, their memory, and their independence. Evidence reviewed by the American Heart Association and the National Institutes of Health shows that early warning signs can appear days to weeks before a stroke. That means you are not helpless, and you are not required to panic. You are invited to notice. This series will be calm, practical, and firm. It is educational guidance and not a diagnosis. And if you have symptoms now, you seek urgent care now. If you feel well but uneasy, stay with me. In the next minutes, I will hand you a simple habit you can try tonight, and then we will step into the first signal your brain uses to tap you on the shoulder long before it cries for help. I remember sitting across from a woman who laughed off the fact that her words stumbled for a few minutes the week before. She thought it was stress or maybe being tired. But when she came to me days later, it was after a stroke that changed her life. What struck me is that she was not alone. Nearly half of the people I have cared for after a stroke admitted that they felt unusual signals days or even weeks earlier. This is not my opinion. It is confirmed by large studies from the American Heart Association. Think about that. Almost 1 out of 2 people had a chance to hear their brain asking for help before the damage took hold. The tragedy is that most of us mistake these early messages for nothing more than aging or a busy schedule. We wave them away as if they are small annoyances. That habit of dismissal is what closes the window that could have kept independence and memory intact. So here is my gentle challenge to you tonight. When your body whispers, do not argue with it and do not brush it aside. Write it down, notice it, and if it repeats, take it seriously. I have seen families who answered early and walked away with full recovery. I have also seen families who missed the moment and carried regret for years. That contrast is why I am urging you now to stay alert. The good news is that you are not powerless. You have time and you have choices if you notice the signs. In the next part, I will guide you to the first specific signal that can appear long before the storm, and I will give you a step you can take tonight to turn attention into protection. I need to stop and tell you something that is just as important as any symptom. I have watched people hold on to advice from a screen while precious hours slipped away, and when they finally reached the hospital, the damage was beyond repair. What I give you here is a map, not the actual road. If you are having symptoms right now, your action is not to wait and finish listening. Your action is to pick up the phone and get urgent care this very moment. I speak in this direct way because I have also seen the other story. I have seen people who noticed the whispers, acted fast, went to their physician, and walked away with recovery. The science I mention comes from the American Heart Association, the National Institutes of Health, and respected journals. And it is solid evidence. But even the most powerful research paper cannot replace the exam of a doctor who knows your body and your story. So here is how I want you to hold this message. Let it be the light that shows you the path, so that when your body speaks, you do not argue with it, you answer it with action and with professional help. With that promise in place, we can move together into the first early sign that often arrives quietly weeks before the storm. The first alarm I want you to notice is the kind of headache that feels like a stranger in your own body. I remember a man in his early 70s who told me that one morning he woke with a deep pounding pain that felt wrong. He tried his usual coffee, his usual rest, and even his usual pills, but nothing touched it. He told himself it was just stress and went on. A few days later, he was in my care after a stroke. He was not unusual. Careful studies published in respected journals have shown that nearly 1 out of 7 people who go on to have a stroke report a sentinel headache in the week before. This is not a common migraine that fades or a tension ache that comes with worry. This is a pain that begins suddenly, feels heavier than your normal pattern, and refuses to leave. The strength of recognizing it is that you are being handed an early warning, a rare window to act before damage. The weakness is that it hides in plain sight. People blame it on age or fatigue, and by dismissing it, they close the window. So here is what I want you to do. Tonight, keep a simple record of any headache that is new in character, that feels different from anything you have carried before. If that note shows a pattern, or if the pain lingers, do not wait. Call for an evaluation. That one act may be the difference between recovery and regret. Your brain is not in the habit of creating unusual pain for no reason. When it sends you a message that feels foreign, listen closely, because it may be trying to keep you alive. In a moment, I will take you to the next signal, a rehearsal that the brain sometimes performs before the main event. There is a rehearsal that the brain sometimes gives, and if you fail to notice it, the main event can follow within days. I remember a woman who told me that her smile had twisted and her words had turned heavy on her tongue for just a few minutes. By the time her daughter saw her, she looked normal again, and she insisted it was nothing. A few days later, she arrived after a major stroke. What she experienced was a transient ischemic attack, or thanks in advance. Strong studies reviewed by the American Heart Association have shown that more than 4 out of 10 people who suffer a stroke report such an episode in the week before. That is not chance. That is the brain shouting in disguise. The gift of recognizing a TIA is that it gives you a final window. It is like watching the preview of a film you do not want to see, but that preview gives you the option to leave the theater before the full tragedy plays. The weakness is that the episode tricks people. The symptoms fade, the words return, the arm lifts, the smile looks normal again, and so they decide the crisis is over. That false relief is what steals their second chance. So here is what I want you to carry tonight. If your face droops, if your arm loses strength, or if your speech suddenly tangles even for a moment, you treat it as urgent. You call for care and you do it now, not later. The difference between brushing it off and answering it may be the difference between walking out of the hospital or living with loss. As we continue, I will show you another sign that hides in dizziness and imbalanced symptoms that too many people blame on age, when in fact they may be the brain pleading for more blood. One of the signals that too many people wave away is the sudden sense that the room is tilting or that their steps are no longer steady. I recall a man in his late 60s who laughed about stumbling in his kitchen and said he was just getting clumsy. A few days later, he was back in my care with a stroke that had been waiting to happen. Strong evidence from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute confirms that dizziness and loss of balance can surface days or even weeks before the event. The advantage of paying attention is that this symptom can open a wide window for intervention. The danger is that it is so easy to explain away. People point to a new medicine or to a problem with the inner ear, or they tell themselves it is nothing more than age. That habit of dismissal silences the warning. In truth, the brain centers that control balance are among the most sensitive to blood flow, and when they falter, they give you early messages. Here is what I ask you to do. If dizziness strikes without a clear reason, if it repeats, or if it comes with blurred vision or headache, you do not wait. You record it, you share it, and you seek care. Your brain is not asking you to push through it. It is asking you to listen before it is too late. Taking that step can prevent a fall, and it can prevent the larger storm. Hold this picture in your mind. When the ground seems to shift beneath your feet, it may not be the floor, it may be your brain calling for blood. In the next part, I will lead you into the sign that hides in your sight when words blur on a page or lights flash where they should not. And the real story lies not in your eyes, but in your brain. Your eyes may feel like the problem, but it is your brain that draws every line and every word. I remember a woman who told me she thought she only needed stronger glasses. The words on the page had begun to blur the street. Signs looked doubled, and once she even saw a flash of light that no one else could see. She laughed it off and waited for her routine eye exam. She never made it to that appointment because her brain was already starving for blood, and days later she arrived after a stroke. Careful studies in respected neurological journals have shown that sudden vision changes often serve as early warnings when the blood supply to the brain begins to falter. The advantage of catching this sign is clear. It can give you a vital chance to intervene before damage sets in. The weakness is that these changes play tricks. They appear and fade. They mimic eye strain. They feel like fatigue, and that illusion convinces people to wait. Waiting is the enemy. If you ever notice words on a page turning blurry, if you see two images where there should be one, or if blind spots or flashing lights appear without cause, you treat that as a message from the brain, not just from your eyes. My advice is simple. Keep a quiet record of your vision just as you might record your blood pressure. If the pattern repeats or if it arrives with a headache or dizziness, you bring it forward and let a doctor evaluate it. Listening to your sight may spare your independence. Your brain paints every picture, and when the brushstrokes smear, it may not be your eyes growing older. It may be your brain asking you to act. Next, I will guide you into another warning, one that hides not in your eyes, but in your mouth when speech itself begins to stumble. There is a warning that hides in plain sight, and it comes from your own mouth. I remember a woman who sat across from me insisting she was only worn out from a long week. Yet her daughter told me that her words had grown heavy, and that sentences she once delivered with ease were now slow and sometimes garbled. What she dismissed as fatigue was, in fact, her brain crying out for blood. Within days, she suffered a stroke. This is why I tell every patient that speech is the most honest mirror of the brain. Studies in neurology confirm that speech disturbances often show up days or even weeks before a major event. The strength of noticing them is that speech rarely invents trouble. When it stumbles, it is usually because the brain itself is struggling. The weakness is that these slips can be quiet. They pass quickly, and people excuse them as stress or distraction or age. That habit of dismissal costs them their chance. So here is what I want you to do. If you find your tongue slipping, if you cannot pull up a simple word, or if your family tells you that you sound different, you do not brush it off. You write it down, you pay attention, and if it repeats, you treat it as urgent. A faltering voice is not just a tired mind. It may be your brain asking for help. Listening to your own speech may protect your memory, your clarity, and your independence. As we continue, I will take you into the next warning sign, one that reveals itself not in words, but in the weakness or numbness that can spread across a single side of the body. One of the most striking warnings the brain can send is when one side of the body suddenly refuses to cooperate. I remember a man who told me he thought his right arm had only fallen asleep while he was resting in his chair. He shook it a little and laughed it off. 2 days later, he could no longer lift that arm at all. What he had ignored was one of the most classic red flags. Neurological studies confirm that one-sided weakness or numbness often shows up in the days or weeks before a stroke. The strength of recognizing this sign is that it is highly specific. Unlike a vague headache or a general tiredness, a sudden loss of grip in one hand, a heavy leg that will not climb stairs, or a face that tingles or droops is almost always a neurological signal. The weakness is that people excuse it. They tell themselves they slept wrong or pinched a nerve, and by the time they learn otherwise, the damage has already struck. So here is what I want you to carry with you tonight. If your grip fades on one side, if your leg feels heavier, if half your face grows numb, you do not argue with it. You write it down, you call for help, and you do it quickly. Your brain is offering you a warning before the full event. Listening may give you the chance to recover and to keep your independence. In the next part, I will show you another warning that hides in plain sight, not in your limbs, but in the kind of exhaustion that no amount of rest can cure. There is a kind of exhaustion that settles on the body like a heavy coat and refuses to lift no matter how much you rest. I remember a woman who swore she was only tired from long days and caring for her grandchildren. She told me she would be fine after a weekend of sleep. Yet each morning she woke more drained than before, and within a week, she was in the hospital after a stroke. This is not ordinary fatigue. Careful research in respected medical journals has shown that deep, unexplained exhaustion often appears weeks before the main event. The strength of this sign is that it marks a shift. It does not match the usual tiredness of daily life. It lingers, it worsens, and it makes even simple tasks feel like climbing a hill. The weakness is that fatigue is so common that nearly everyone excuses it. People call it stress or aging or too many responsibilities, and they move on. That habit blinds them to the fact that the brain is forcing conservation because its blood and energy supply are faltering. So here is the step I want you to take. If you feel a fatigue that does not lift after real rest, if you cannot focus, if your motivation thins, or if routine chores feel strangely heavy, you do not argue with it. Write it down, notice if it comes with other signals like headache, dizziness, or slips of speech, and bring it to your physician if it repeats. Your brain uses a fifth of your body's energy, and when it cries out in exhaustion, it is not laziness, it is a warning. Listening may mean the difference between protecting your independence and losing it. In the next part, we will move into a warning that surprises many. It comes not from your limbs or your eyes, but from the sudden silence of hearing that arrives without reason. There is a warning that most people never connect to the brain yet. I have seen it unfold too many times. I remember a man who woke one morning to silence in his left ear. He joked that it must be wax and waited for it to clear. By the end of the week, he was in my care after a stroke. Sudden hearing loss, especially when it affects only one ear, has been linked by careful studies to strokes that involve the back circulation of the brain. This is not the slow fading of age and not the ringing that comes from years of loud music. This is silence that arrives quickly, sometimes overnight, and it carries weight. The strength of this sign is that it is highly specific. Ears do not go silent without reason, and when they do, it is often because the same blood vessels that feed your hearing also feed your brain. The weakness is that most people dismiss it. They blame age, wax, fluid, or a minor infection, and by doing so, they waste the final warning. So, here is what I want you to do. If your hearing suddenly disappears, if you wake to silence in one ear, if it comes with dizziness or unsteady steps, you do not wait for it to pass. You treat it as urgent, and you seek care at once. Medical journals have confirmed this link, and answering it may save not only your hearing, but your brain itself. When you learn to listen to the silence, you may protect your future. In the next and final part, I will take you through a group of unusual signs that do not seem connected at first, but together, they form the last cry of a brain under threat. Not every stroke warning looks like the ones printed on posters. I remember a woman who fainted while shopping and laughed it off as low blood sugar. By the evening, she was in a hospital bed with scans that revealed her brain had been struggling for days. Sometimes the warning comes as sudden confusion, as a seizure that seems to appear out of nowhere, as a collapse with no clear trigger, or as a wave of nausea that makes no sense. These are not the common signals, but they are no less urgent. The strength of paying attention is that it protects the people who do not fit the textbook picture. The weakness is that these signs are vague and overlap with other conditions, so people excuse them. That dismissal is the danger. If you find yourself unable to think straight, if you fall without reason, if sickness hits you without cause, you treat it as urgent until a doctor proves otherwise. Research in neurology confirms that unusual presentations can still be preludes to major strokes. The brain rarely creates chaos for no reason. So here is what I ask of you. When your body acts in a way that frightens you and offers no explanation, You seek help. It is always safer to be told, "It is nothing," than to learn too late, "It was everything." Nearly half of stroke survivors later admit they had early warnings. The difference between recovery and regret is whether they listened. Listening is your power. And as we close, I want you to carry this message beyond yourself. Share it with your family, speak it to your friends, because the act of spreading awareness can protect not only your life, but the lives of those you love. Almost half of the people I have cared for after a stroke later admitted that their brain had spoken to them days or weeks before. The difference between recovery and regret was not in whether the warning came. It was in whether they listened. I carry with me the memory of two patients. One woman who noticed her strange headaches, wrote them down, called her physician, and walked out of the hospital with her independence intact. Another man ignored the numbness in his arm and lived the rest of his years unable to lift that arm again. Science confirms these warnings are real, but your choice is what gives them power. Your body does not create whispers for nothing. It creates them because it is fighting to protect you. The strongest action you can take is to listen. Remember the simple guide called FAST, face-arm speech time. If your face begins to droop, if your arm grows weak, if your words stumble, you do not wait. You call for help because every minute counts. It is always better to be told it was nothing than to find out too late it was everything. My final invitation to you is to carry this knowledge beyond yourself. Share it with your spouse, with your children, with your neighbors. Ask them to listen to their bodies as well. Stroke may try to steal independence, but knowledge returns the power to fight back. Listening to these early signs may save your life, and it may save the life of someone you love. That is a legacy worth leaving, and together, by spreading this message, we can protect countless futures.